All right, what do we got now? So, Grape Pet X, Grape Ape Texas, I'm assuming. All right, cool. You got it. All right. Mike is trying to work out some technical difficulties on his end, and we're going to see what we can do.
Yep, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and you're good to go. Hello, Mike. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? So, um,
All right, we're going to be on a delay because I'm listening to you through Twitch. So,
yeah. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let the people know.
sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Shorten, known as Chicago Wiz around the internet. I am a longtime fan of Gary Con, been going since Gary Con 2. And I am of course, a game master. I've been running games since the late 70s when I picked up my first basic box set with these strange dice and these books that just opened up a new world for me. And I've been playing ever since. I still play with the old games. I play with first edition AD&D. I play with the 1974 OD&D. And I love helping and supporting folks learn how to be GMs.
And I don't know if this got caught in the earlier thing, but my name is Mike Espinos. I've been playing since second edition. Did some White Wolf gaming, a variety of other things, even some LARPing, if you're willing to forgive me for that. And I have since just been helping out new players and getting started, getting groups going, and in general, just having a lot of fun teaching people about DMing, gaming, and all the things that make me happy. So I want to start off with my first and most important slide, which is simply put, disclaimer, do not engage in digital piracy or theft of copyrighted works. This is my default thing I want to tell everybody. Please don't do this, because if we pay for the things that we love, they'll make more of it. If we steal it all, we're never seeing it again. So, first question I got for you, Mike, is what is the role of a DM?
Oh, gosh. Uh, well, for me, my role is to present and engage my players with a world that they'll want to spend their time exploring and getting involved in. That means I'm, creating a world and situations that they'll feel are engaging, that they'll want to, get involved in. It's learning about my players, what motivates them, what kinds of things that they want to do, what kinds of things they enjoy, what kind of things they may not enjoy. Um, it's a never-ending journey for me. My role is also to learn. I'm always trying to pick up new ideas and new things. That's why I like coming to uh, seminars like this, so that I can learn and learn from other people that probably do it way better than I do.
I would add that in my world, the role of a DM is to facilitate the play between the players and the world. It's a it's a collaborative storytelling environment where we all work together to have fun. And we can discuss this a little bit later about whether there's a right way or a wrong way to have fun. But I think it's important to recognize and realize that the DM is the one with ultimate control, but also ultimate responsibility, because your responsibility is to the players. One of the stories I've told a few times this weekend is the very first DM I ever had back in second edition loved to get us together so we could all sit around a table and he could prove to us how smart he was, how much smarter he was than all of us over and over again by killing our characters or setting traps that we couldn't find or things like that, or making the clue to solve the mystery nearly impossible to understand. He was so much smarter than us, and that was his goal. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it. I stepped away from D&D for nearly 2 decades because of it. So that's a situation where a DM
Mm.
can shape the experience for good or bad. So I think it's important to pay attention to the role of DM. And following up on that, Mike, I think you'll have some great insights on this. If the role of the DM is to facilitate fun, then what becomes the role of the player?
Oh, that's a really great question, especially since I view the DM as much of an equal participant in play as the players. Um, so the role of everyone at my table is to uh, one, kind of obey the social contract we have with each other. Don't be a jerk to each other. Be respectful of each other. Your fun does not come at the expense of someone else's fun. Um, to participate, to actually give an honest effort in being a part of the game. Um, and everyone has different motivations. My wife and I do a one-on-one game, and so for her, it is very much about being a part of the story. Whereas with my AD&D players that meet at, at my house, they are very much about getting in and doing the combat and getting into the nitty gritty of it. So I expect them to put in that effort where they truly want to be a part of the game.
Yeah, and Turtle Dove 1309 asks us, is your style more story or fighting? Do you think one
And
is
you'll have
better?
to forgive me, Mike. I've lost the Twitch feed, so I'm running blind here.
Okay. I'm gonna ask in the. I'm gonna ask. Um, I'll answer the question to start with. The question being style of the DM, story or fighting. There's a lot of different styles for how you can be, and I think I think it's important. It's important to discuss that. It's a session zero responsibility for the DM and the players. When you're answering the question of what style of game you want, it's something that um, you as a DM need to establish. It's a relationship between you and the players, and it's important that once you've established that relationship on what the game is going to be, you go forward. So I have a game that's very political. A lot of people don't want a political game, but my players enjoyed that. That's what they wanted. I've also had games where it's straight adventure or a dungeon crawl. There's no one thing that's better than others. What's most important is the thing that works for both the players and the DM. And there are certain games that I won't. There are certain games that I won't facilitate because I don't want to have a game that is. I don't do evil games. I don't do murder and pillage and all of that. I like games that are enjoyable for me as a player and me as a DM. So I hope that answers the question. Mike, did you have anything you want to add as to what's the best type of game? Because Turtle Dove's question was, is your style more story or fighting, or do you think one is better?
My style is very much. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback here. This is driving me crazy. Okay, so my style is very much about where we go as a group. Sometimes the situation is more about the story, is more about, they're going to role play. My tabletop group just culminated about a 3-year arc where they've managed to get a legendary weapon. It was all role playing for that session. That was about 5 hours of straight role playing. Then there's been other sessions where it's been from start to finish one combat. So it's really about adapting to where the game has taken you and where you find yourself in.
All right, so we got a great question from Grape Ape, Texas. I'm assuming that's Texas. So to sum it up, they DM'd and played a lot in the 80s and early 90s. Skipped quite a few editions. And fifth edition is a brand new world, and they want to know what type of research, what type of effort they need to put in to learn before being a DM. So here's a secret: I just started a campaign, and one of the things I got really lucky because I use D&D Beyond, and you can actually click on a lot of the stuff and it'll give you information. An example would be you can click on grapple and it'll explain the grapple mechanic to you. It'll things like that. I also listened to a handful of podcasts that were fifth edition podcasts to get an idea for what the play style was like and what I was missing. But I have not read the player's handbook or the DM's guide cover to cover ever in any game system I've ever run. I just kind of play off my players, and then the thing is, I lean on my players sometimes. I'm like, oh man, I don't ever play a caster class. Um, how does concentration work in fifth edition? And the funny thing is they'll help you because
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to play, so no one's going to yell at you for not knowing the rules. Mike, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same situation as with Great Bay. I still play the older editions, so and my kids wanted to play fifth edition. My daughter plays a lot of fifth edition, so I picked up the starter set. And the first goal that I had for learning the new system was just to relax and focus on the main parts. I bought the starter set, and the starter set is really good because it gives you a stripped down version of the rules, almost like the old basic books. You said you gained from the 80s to 90s. It would kind of like being picking up Moldvay's BX, learning the basics of the game from that, and then jumping, say, into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Well, that's kind of how I'm treating the starter set as moving into the core rules for fifth edition. In fact, we just played it last night, and sometimes you are going to have to pause and flip through the rule book. And as like Mike pointed out, sometimes you've got experienced players at the table, and they're more than willing to help and to help out other players learn it. Because one of the things you're going to find for fifth edition, it is very player centric. It's focused on the players knowing more about the mechanics than you do, and that's where the starter set will help you because you'll kind of get the feel for it. Just the simple. I'm a simple guy. I'm not a smart guy. I'm not a genius. So I like picking up the rules a little bit at a time. And if you're like that, the starter set's really good for doing that.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things and I don't know if it's in print or if it's just something that Chris Perkins says over and over again, but it's the rule of cool. I don't always have to know what the mechanics are, but I'll tell you that if what you're doing sounds awesome, I'm going to see if we can make it happen potentially in the game. Because
Mm-hmm.
I want to see cool things happen. I mean, if you're gonna jump off the top of a castle and try to belly flop onto a dragon, okay. If you make the rolls, you're gonna do it. It's gonna hurt, but I want to see it happen. And if you don't make the rolls, I also want to see that happen in a way.
And
But
sometimes, just to piggyback on that, something that I'll do is I'll ask the players, how do you see that happening? How are you going to make that work? And that gives me enough time to kind of riff off of them and figure out what they're going to do. The other thing is I go back to something that I've done since the beginning. I'll just grab a D6 and roll it. One or two, it looks good. Three through six, it's not so good.
yeah, I've let the dice decide a lot of things. Great Babe asks another question: how much should we know, or how much should we incorporate, or how important is Adventure League in DMing in the present day with Fifth Edition? Just getting back into AL seems like another set of rules you have to know. I would say if you're going to DM, you should really understand AL. Like you should really read it back and front because AL is it's based on standardization. This module is the same no matter where you go. That being said, AL is something where I'll borrow the stories from AL. I'll buy them on DM's Guild, and I'll roll parts of them with my players. But I personally don't enjoy AL because my playstyle leans more towards having fun and allowing the players to just be whatever they want to be. For example, I have a campaign I ran where there was a Warforged in Faerun. And a Warforged should not be in Faerun. They're supposed to be stuck in Eberron. but he really wanted to play it. Okay, cool, whatever. That's his thing. Um, and AL, the other thing, and this is totally 100% personal opinion. AL incentivizes min maxing, which is a thing that as a DM I enjoy very little. I try to avoid it with players because min maxing is just it takes the joy of play out of it, and it just turns into a game of mathematics, which I like math as much as the next person, which doesn't say a lot. So, what do you think, Mike?
I'm, well, two things. One, I'm probably the worst person to ask this question because I don't use modules. I don't do the Adventure League. I've never found a reason to because I've always had too much fun creating my own worlds. Now, I will steal from modules.
Yeah,
I don't think you have to. Adventure League, from, and this is from an outsider, when I look and I see people getting involved in Adventure League, it's a different style of the same game. I guarantee you that there is just as many people not playing Adventure League, but sitting down having a wonderful fifth edition experience or D&D experience as the people who are. You're going to see a lot of Adventure League at the conventions, but I don't think as a DM you necessarily have to do it. What I would encourage as learning fifth edition is just play it. Whether you play it as a player, whether you play it as a DM, just get into it because it's learning the skills, getting back into it. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. You rode that bicycle in the 80s and 90s, you're going to be able to ride it here in the 20 teens.
yeah. There's a lot of tools out there that actually make it a little bit easier too. The the Control F feature is an amazing thing for when you're looking for something on a page online or in a digital document. Man, I've used that thing. It got me through school as well as through DMing a lot of times. All right, so MJ Miko says, I'm in a similar situation, played back in the 80s with BX and 1E AD&D. I was typically a player back then. Just past year, I got back into D&D 5e. I always wanted to become a DM, but I was just nervous about running a game. I'm also a rule follower and feel like everything has to be run by the book. I know that is something that I need to shake off because it's my game and I can make it what I want. Any advice on how to get out of that mindset? Yes, play with small children. They don't care about the rules. You play with small children and they're going to come up with the wackiest, most amazing answers to solving things. And yeah, rules, they're going to come up with ways that the rules never even considered as a means of answering the question. For example, how much damage does it do if you body slam somebody through ice? Is it fall damage, cold damage? I mean, like, I don't know. I have no idea. So we just made it up as we went along. Um, but yeah, be loose. Play with people who are fun. Maybe if you really feel that the rules are important, maybe play in a homebrew campaign where people aren't expecting a set outcome. And this way, if you bend the rules or change the rules, that's cool. Because I know a lot of people who actually mix and match the rules. I still find myself announcing that a enemy is bloody, which is a fourth edition thing. And my players are like, so? I'm like, I don't know. I just do. Whatever. Like, you can mix and match and bring things in however you want to make things work. And a homebrew campaign removes the expectation that it's a set thing. Mike, do you want to add
I'm
to
going to
that?
take, yeah, I do. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack in that if you really enjoy the rules and that's something that, you feel like you want to be that kind of DM, start small. If, fifth edition has a lot of the different rules, and I'm kind of the same way. I like playing a game by the rules and then changing things because I like to understand how the game's going to flow so that way I understand what my change is. But for me, with combat, there's so many options that players can do in fifth edition. I let them worry about that. I focus on, do I have the sequence of flow going? Do I know the different types of actions, the basic ones that you can do, attack and all of that. Once I get that down and I feel comfortable about that, then I go and I start focusing on the extras. So, take it at your own pace. I still don't, I've been running. This is my first edition book. I've been running with this for almost 40 years now, and I still learn things about it. I think it's a mastery that takes a lifetime. I don't think anyone knows all the rules and plays with all the rules. So forgive yourself, grab the bits that you want to grab, and run with it.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I would add to that is that the DM's handbook is one of the greatest guides to how to work with other people. Like not just in a game setting, it's really good at teaching you how just to work with other people, how to be a professional, how to adapt, how to say yes and no but, and how to just say okay, I like where this idea is going. Let's figure it out. And to share credit, to share responsibility. It's there's a lot in there that I mean, honestly, it could be a business class in how to be a leader.
I've taught that. Everything I learned about team leadership, I learned from D&D.
Yeah, I mean, it's for real. I learned a lot from it.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so DM Critic asks on the subject of published content versus homebrew. If you're beginning DM, lost it. Scroll up. How much do you recommend starting with your own content versus using published content? I honestly, if you're a beginning DM, I would say go with published content first because it'll give you a feel for the format and the pacing and the structure for creating fights. One of the hardest things to do is to create fights. Somebody earlier said that they'd had a DM who thought the fight would take 30 to 40 minutes. It was over in 10. I've had that happen. I had a fight that was supposed to be a like a mini big boss fight, and the players knocked him out in the first round before the boss even had a character. But surprise, he had plot armor. So he lasted through their. They all blew all their big spells right up front, and plot armor saved his life because I needed him to at least fire off one attack to give them a clue as to who or what he was, so they could go forward. Because if they killed him before he fired off anything, they wouldn't have had a chance at figuring out the next step. But published content is it's a really great framework that you can work around. I read everything I can. I'm not a Critical Role fan. I'm sorry for those of you who are, but I'm not. But the player's guide or the explorer's guide to Wildmount um, has some really great stuff in there, and it has some great adventures and it has some great encounters that I haven't thought about, and I'm going to incorporate some of those ideas into my own homebrew world. So, Mike, do you want to add to that?
I do. I'm going to piggyback one thing that you had mentioned about the plot armor. In my world, NPCs are meant to die. If it's a 10-minute fight because the players planned it out and did all of the things that they were supposed to do, so be it. Then it's a 10-minute fight, they get the reward, and it's all good. By contrast, I've had situations where I thought it was going to be a 10-minute wandering monster fight, and it turns out to be a 3 hour near TPK. So, your mileage may vary on that. As far as recommending starting your own content versus published, I agree with Mike. Looking at just getting an idea of how adventures are written, what goes into them. Plus, you're reading that content so that you know what you like. There's
Yeah.
a One of the reasons I don't use modules is I find a lot of the modules kind of force an approach that I may not necessarily want. That Minds of Fandelver is a perfect one. I've taken that thing apart and restructured it, almost rewritten it, so that I know how I like it. But the only way as a beginning DM you're going to know is to pull that stuff to read it. One thing is that if you do feel the call of creating your own stuff, start small. I use a rule of three. I'll have three locations that they can go to. I'll have three NPCs that they can interact with. I'll have three hooks that they can hook onto so that it gives them choice, but it doesn't overload you or me as the DM with all of these options that I may have to come up with.
Yeah, the rule of three is something I hear quite a bit in various forms, but they're all part of that same idea of having different routes. And I'm gonna spoil something that's a little bit of a spoiler in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, but at the end of it, the players face a dragon, And there's a lot of different outcomes that the book suggests. And based on the different outcomes, they didn't expect my players to offer the dragon a job. Yeah, my players, on behalf of the city of Waterdeep, offered the dragon employment, and they
Nice.
really pitched it well. They're like, "Hey, you want to sit on a pile of gold? Well, you're only sitting on a portion of the city's wealth. What if we made you the city treasurer?" And the dragon was like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'll take it." I'm like, I, I didn't know how to respond to that, but I played with it. I'm like, why wouldn't it? It's a gold dragon. You're offering it a chance to sit on more gold. I mean, it's a happy dragon. So you can never anticipate. There's no way in the world you can anticipate what your players are going to do. But it's important to, when they do something that's just wild and awesome, that you really let them have it. So Grape Ape asks, out of curiosity, what is your most valuable D&D possession, emotionally or monetarily? Mine is the limited edition Chaka, the Forever Man comic I got from Gen Con back when it was held in Milwaukee when I was a kid for free as a promotion. Fast forward 30 years, and I had it signed by both authors a few years ago at the Texas Comic Con. Well, that's awesome. That sounds like a great memory. I am not a collector. I have things that I've done, but for me, my greatest oh, hold on, do to scroll. Here we go. Um, my greatest my greatest things are memories that I have from playing, from the people I've played with. The first time my daughter killed a monster, or the first time she made her own character. Which, by the way, my 7-year-old daughter, she likes to play a barbarian that punches people in the face until they die. So she's awesome. But those kind of things, I have her character sheet, and I may keep it. But I mean, it's the memories for me that matter, and I do pick up things here and there. But I'm just as likely to give you something if you're like, hey, that's cool. So I wish I don't really have anything. Mike, what do you got? Obviously, you ran off, so I assume you have something.
I do, I do. So I had mentioned that I had a box set that I had bought in 1978. It was the Holmes
Oh,
basic
nice.
game. And this is not the book that I owned for 40 years. I picked this up a few years later. But this book, I always go back to for just some inspiration and some fun. It has the first dungeon that I had ever read, the Tower of Xenopus. It was the sample dungeon in this book, as well as Peep on the Borderlands.
That's a classic.
So
I like that one.
yeah, these two, and then there's a story behind this. So these here are the original booklets. This is the, let's see, which printing is it probably doesn't say in here. Yeah, I'm not sure which. I think this is the fourth or fifth printing of the original booklets that were printed in 1974. When I bought them, I thought the guy on Craigslist was ripping me off. So I told him I'd give him $25, and he agreed. The cool thing about it is on the dragon here, some probably 6-year-old kid colored the dragon yellow. So ever since I picked up these books, I've made sure to stat out a yellow dragon.
Nice. I had a OG copy of Blackmore, the first one, and it even had like it had the notes and stuff in there. I picked it up at Goodwill, and I thought it was really neat. Yeah, that one, and I thought it was really neat, and I had it, and um, I had worked with a boss who was into gaming and D&D, and I asked him to send me to a conference, and he did. It was a C2E2, which he sent me as a professional conference to a Comic Con, and as a thank you gift, I gave him my Blackmore book, and a lot of people have gasped in horror that I gave it to him, but I'm like, he appreciated it, and he as a collector he would enjoy it. I just thought it was neat while I had it, and I was happy to have somebody who would appreciate it to give it to. So I'm honestly the worst person to ask those kinds of questions to.
That's a
So
good question.
it is. So here's a question that we have. Um, what are NPCs and how important are they to story progression? Because I say what are NPCs, I think we kind of understand the non-player character, but are they an extension of the DM? Are they tools that the players should be using, or are they just characters that exist in the world? Mike, lead off on this one.
Yes, all of those. And the most important rule that I have is no NPC is more important than the player. You mentioned it about the DM that likes to show off. I've played in games where the NPCs were the focus. They were everything that the story and the game was about. I never wanted to be that way. The NPCs are important. I'll play with them. I'll put emotions into them. I will make players upset when the NPCs die. But for me, no NPC is more important than the player in terms of whether they live or die, whether they're important to the story or not. Obviously, they're important. So if the players, walk into town and they go up to the, town mayor and whack them, well, the players are going to reap the consequence of their actions. But the game will go on. There's no, we all played the video games where you can't kill certain characters because they're quote unquote that important. Not in my world. There may be consequences to your actions, but for me, the NPCs are secondary.
Yeah. Um, I had a campaign where the NPC was the hook to the entire campaign. He was the driving force behind it, and the players just never liked him. They never engaged with him. They never took to the character. And then so I was just sick of having him sitting around, so I sacrificed him in a fight. Um, and holy cats, the players were willing to go to another realm or go to another plane to save him. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you guys couldn't even remember his name a week ago, and that changed the whole arc of our campaign. So I just
Yeah,
got rid of him for fun because I was like, I don't want to have to open this tab every time we play. And the next thing I knew, that became the focus of our campaign was go save him, and it was
nice.
wild to me. NPCs, they're there, but yeah, they're totally fungible, and I really hesitate when I bring them in because one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to turn into that DM who is telling the NPC story and the players are just there to watch, and that's not what anybody wants. Um, the players should always be the focus. And this is actually I'm gonna get off the question here on this one, but there's a philosophy in players that they love a good backstory. And I see anytime a player has a backstory that's more than like 2 paragraphs, I try to limit players to 500 words because anything more than that ends up being the player wants to tell their story to everybody else in their backstory. And that's great. But I'd rather have what's called a front story, which is where the player just gives me an idea of their background. And then we craft their story through play because this way we're focused on going forward rather than telling what had happened before. And I worry about backstory for that because it's not just about one singular player. There's usually what 3 to 5 people or however many you have at the table that are playing, and you're a party that's going to craft a story together rather than one person who's just going to tell the other 4 people. And it kind of comes into the same realm as the NPC. I don't do it with my NPCs, and I kind of ask my players not to do it with their character. So, all right, so let's see, and that kind of leads into the question that's classic: who is more important, the DM or the player? Um, Honestly, the player. I know that it's not a popular choice in most people's world. The DM tells a story. We wouldn't be there without the DM, but the players, I'm there for the players, and they're the more important ones because I don't have a story to tell without players. Mike, do you have any thoughts?
I say both. And the reason I say both is because just as there's no game without players, unless you're playing a DM-less game, there's no games without the world that you're playing in. There's no game without kind of the foil, if you will, to what the players want to do. If the players aren't having fun, then I'm not having fun. But then if I'm not having fun, then the players are not going to have fun. So I see it as a balance, as a yin and yang, and it's true whether it's a one-on-one game. Like I've been playing a one-on-one game with my wife for about 11 years now. The current campaign that I'm in is also running about 11 years, and I've seen players come and go, but the balance that we have, a lot of it is, are they having fun? But a lot of it is am I still engaged in this world? Am I still engaged with what's going on? Am I enjoying things? I've had players that came into the campaign that made it miserable for everyone, and I had to ask them to leave. And I realized that that's on my shoulders to do. It wasn't a fun part, but if I left them there, then it was really going to drag the campaign down for me as well as for them. So, I had to do what I had to do, and that's kind of just how it's grown for me. That we both are part of the game.
Yeah. One of the important things that I think is key to remember that this there's that no matter what, the player and the DM are playing together. So it's collaborative storytelling, and I'm not a writer. I couldn't write a book because I can tell stories for days that could turn into books, but I couldn't actually write one by myself because I need the feedback from somebody else who's engaging with it, who's engaging with the material for me to have a to be able to write the next part. Because on my own, I just don't. So Turtle Dove 1309 asks, "Do you prefer to be the DM or player if you have a choice?" In this case, the DM is as good as you. I I'm both. My biggest fear as a player now is that I've DM for so long that I always fear that when I play, that I'm going to try and DM on accident. And even though I'm not telling the story, like I'll still be like, I'll still fall into some of those roles. But I found that being a DM who's playing gives me the gives me the the advantage of being able to see the other players at the table and be like, almost help out the DM. Like, hey, that person isn't engaging. I'm like, hey, Rufio, I think you might have a skill that could apply to this situation, and that player might take another look at their character sheet and engage in a way that they hadn't before. So I think that even when I play, I still DM. What about you, Mike? Any preference on playing versus DMing?
I'd have to say that I probably prefer to DM, only because I'm I am I'm so picky as a player. There's certain games that I like to play, and that's why I like Gary Con and other conventions. Is it gives me a chance to kind of stick my toe out. I'm kind of a conservative player in that way, that I like what I like, and I stick to it. Kind of like having a favorite meal. Um, so I like being exposed to like new games. I'll try out like a new board game or a new war game or that. But if it's Dungeons and Dragons, me personally, I prefer to DM.
All right, Skull and Pants asks, "Is it possible that the most important player might be whoever is not having fun?" Um, I don't know. I don't know to describe the most important player. But what I will say is it's important if somebody isn't having fun is to have communication with them to understand why. This may not be for them. This may not be the type of game. I've been honest with DMs and I've said, "Hey, your session 0 was good. I liked how we started. We got a session in and your play style doesn't match me." But that's because I'm extroverted to the point where I'll talk to people about that. I've also had players who just ghost. They're like, "No, I'm out. That's not my thing."
Right.
And
Right.
it may be something that is not what they were expecting. It may not be something, or maybe something that they weren't interested in, or they might have thought it was going to be one thing and it was a different. But just because somebody isn't having fun, you can have a if it's somebody who's been around for a while, have a personal conversation with them. Be like, "Hey, what's going on? I noticed you're not engaging as much. Is there something I can do to help you out?" It might be a hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Or maybe they don't like their character. Like, have you ever had that one person who's trying to kill their character and you realize it's because they just don't like their character anymore? Can you find? Do you want to just offer them a chance to do a different character, or do you want to find something that will help them re-engage? It's kind of like that question in relationships: is a relationship worth saving, or is it easier just to move on? And I think that's important. It's communication. You want to add anything?
Yeah, I do. The first thing is what is fun? How do you define fun? I've had some games where I guarantee you the players weren't having fun because it was tough. It was a struggle. They were having to deal with a situation that I wouldn't define as fun, but it was definitely engaging. It was definitely equitable. They were definitely present in the game. So for that, um, to me, the most important player would be the player who, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like they're engaged. And there's an ebb and a flow to that. Not everyone can have the spotlight at the same time. Not everyone is going to feel just as compelled to engage in the situation at the same time. But I try to make it that during a session, over a couple of sessions, everyone feels like that they've had a chance to hook into something that means something to them, whether as a player or part of their character.
Yeah, that's important. All right, so Turtle Dove, you had a question about maps and things like that. I wanted to share. I'm going to share a link with you from my online tabletop gaming on a budget, and it gives you kind of an idea of what I do. Um, sorry, I've done maps and minis as well, but I also do a lot of online stuff, and there's a lot of great ways to do it without getting too much over the top. But yeah, maps and minis, sets, draw. It's up to you. What are your players like? What do you like? I used to not do minis because I didn't have any minis. So like it was like, hey, I've got a Lego guy, a bottle cap, and a nickel. So that's what we're gonna
Oh,
have.
that's
Everybody attack
awesome.
the nickel. So,
That's
um,
awesome.
any opinions on sandboxing versus railroading? Are there times when you consider railroading to be more important? You can railroad people without it feeling like a railroad. I have small children and I railroad them all the time. They have no idea I'm doing it. It's just a simple. So hey guys, do you want to do? Let's. Would you like to go here? No, we don't want to go here. Okay, cool. So you don't want to go here, so you go somewhere else, and the item leads you there, and like, oh, okay, it's you don't. Like, it depends on how hard you push it. If you have to really push railroading, then you're not listening to the players, and it's a two way. Again, collaborative storytelling is a two-way communication between the players and the DM. But sandboxing is also fun, but sometimes the players it's too much. They're just like, I don't know where to go. I don't have a. I guess my character is going to drink until we start a fight. So I don't know, Mike. What do you want to?
Um, Going back to, well, I'll answer this and I'll go back to the maps and minis because I'm a war gamer, so you can see where this is going to go. Um, I think there's a balance. I know I keep saying this word balance, but there is a balance between sandboxing and railroading. That's why I always try to have at least three things that the players can engage in. Sometimes they may have to dig a little bit. Sometimes it's going to be right there in front of them, but they always have a option of what to do. I'm running a session tonight called The Heist, and it is like an Ocean's 11 Italian Job kind of game. I've had to structure in such a way that there's agency there, but at the same time, they could spend 4 hours just investigating things. So I have to kind of railroad them, and I'm doing that by a time mechanism. They only have so much time to get this job done, or their window closes. So they've got that sense of urgency. So it's a balance of both. And someone else pointed later, the idea of a con session versus a group campaign. Definitely in a con session, there's going to be more structure around it. There's going to be more of a finite, here's the path that you can go. Now, if they choose to go off that path in a con game, okay, so be it. But at least I'm trying to get them and I'm setting the boundaries. And most people at a con game tend to be very forgiving of that. They know they know the score. They know that, unless it's a bad player or a player that wants to cause trouble, most people are going to be okay with that. So a little bit of railroading there is fine. In terms of maps and minis, I'm a war gamer, so I have almost 1,500 minis. So, Mike, I got you covered if you want to come up to Chicago. Um, but I do all the above. I'll do a whiteboard. I'll do, I've got the terrain, so I'll set out the terrain. For my online games, I don't do as much of the battle maps, only because I find that the whiteboarding tends to be a little bit more forgiving, and I find that with the battle boards or the battle maps, they want to draw by the squares, and I don't like that. So it feels board gaming to me. So anyway,
All right, so we're running close to time because I'm actually DMing a game at 1 because for some reason I was not intelligent in my scheduling and giving myself a buffer. So MJ Miko asks again, how about preparation for beginning DM? I do have some research and I have seen everything on both ends of the spectrum. Is there a happy medium somewhere in between? I subscribe
Yes.
to the lazy DM mentality. I just write notes occasionally to myself. Like I have a new campaign. I've said this in a few other streams I did this weekend that the only note I have for the next session with my new campaign is there's going to be a dwarf and drag named Madam Damage. I don't know where we're going from there, but it's going to be fun. I'm occasionally will write things down on post-it notes. I hold them up, but they're green and they disappear. See, like, whoo. So, um, Mike, what do you have?
Um, I'm putting a link in the Twitch chat here. It's to my method called just three hexes. You've been hearing me say three a lot. My 10-year AD&D campaign started off with three hexes. I had three locations for the players to go to, and that was to make it easy on me because I did. This world is huge. The land mass is the size of Russia, but that started from three hexes. So start small, um, get into that, get the flow, get the feel for your campaign with just that small, and then you'll decide how much you want to do. There's been times where I get a sudden burst of creativity and I spend hours writing something. And then there's other games where I've literally been running it by the seat of my pants because I just have not felt like prepping.
Yeah, I mean, there's times where I've sat down at a table or GM didn't show up, and I'm like, all right, what was this supposed to be? And then we just start making it up as we go along. Um, all right, so the direction of the session may vary. So yeah, for 4 hour sessions, honestly, I've actually shortened my sessions down for my players because we play online to 3 hours, which has worked out a lot better for me than 4 hours, and I don't know why. I think it's just natural storytelling, and I also have that hour and a half where I just there's a bio break where everyone can step off, get a drink, come back, and do those kind of things. I would love to have campaigns run forever. Most of my campaigns run for about 9 months before life gets in the way of one player or another, and then we have to move on. So I try to be honest with my players. If they keep going, I'll keep going, but I usually get to about 9 months average. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I do 6 to 8 hour sessions for the tabletop, but then we only meet once a month. Adults and schedule. Uh, it is an 11-year campaign, so we've managed to make that work. For my online campaigns, which take place in the same world as my tabletop campaign, those sessions run about 2 to 3 hours. And like you, I found that online, for whatever reason, and maybe it's because we're not together and riffing off of each other's energy, you're just kind of staring at a screen. I think that may play a little bit into it, but I find the 2 to 3 hour sessions seem to work well.
Sorry, Skull Pants response. I don't even know what you're responding to with your mom. Okay, we have a. I believe we may have a troll in
Uh,
the field.
he,
So
he's having fun. Anyway,
yeah. Um. But yeah. So we're having
what
a good time now. With all of that, do you have any final thoughts before we close out?
funny, I was just going to ask you the same thing. What is the one thing that you would tell yourself 10 years ago, if you went back in time to yourself 10 years from today, so 2010, what would be the one thing you would tell yourself to that's the biggest lesson that you've learned as a DM?
10 years ago, stop being a chicken and start and just be the DM because I had like live action role playing. I was a DM storyteller back in the day, and then I was so afraid of not knowing the rules or not being right or all of those things that 10 years ago I wanted to play and I had friends and all of those things, but nobody was the DM and I knew I could do it. I just didn't feel like I could. So my advice to myself would be don't be a chicken, get out there and play. How about yourself? What was your advice? What would be your advice to yourself?
Um, we start, or for the first couple of years, I ran the game as like this real simulation game, and I was real uptight about it. And then once I stopped, and started just having fun with the fantasy and the fantastic, everybody started having fun. And so I would probably tell myself, just have fun. Don't worry about being uber realistic. Don't worry about having all of the questions answered and whatnot. Just have fun and roll with it.
Yeah. Oh, you love my shirt, Turtle Dove? That's the Gary Con GM shirt this year, or is it because we also it's Saturday, so I got to wear my Hawaiian shirt. Um. So yeah, or I also have my really cool dragon hat. Um. Yeah. So one last thing. Thank you for your time. Oh, thank you. With Gary Con being canceled. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for attending. You nerds never give up. We are amazing. That even when things are tough, canceled 2 weeks before the event, everyone still got together online and you showed up. Like at least 30 of you were here for this, which is would have been a good seminar in person. So Gary Con's here because and survives because you guys came together for it. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Mike, for your time. I'm going to
Well,
end the
thank you,
stream.
Mike, for inviting me.
Happy
I'm
to.
very grateful.
All right, everybody, have a good one.
All right, bye bye.